Boom. Presenter view on there.
Beauteous.
That
I had some cards and stuff, a sack of cards.
I set them down.
Oh, there, I see them.
Okay.
I'll give you the microphone when I'm done. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for coming to the Iowa Files on this wonderful January day. My name is David. I'm the producer with Conjunction Media, who is happy to be streaming the Iowa Files for the West Des Moines Historical Society today. And Gail is always nice enough to give me a minute to talk about what we do at Conjunction Media before we start. So at Conjunction Media, we have actually two specialties. Number one, we specialize in both educational and corporate video production. We're a several-time Iowa Motion Picture Association award winner, including for a production we did for the Historical Society last year. I have a master's degree in education where I have been able to teach businesses and organizations how to increase the creative thinking and problem-solving skills of their workforce. And so I've got several resources at the back table you're welcome to check out when the presentation is done. My website is conjunctionmedia.com. We're called Conjunction Media because in astronomy, a conjunction is when the stars align, and at Conjunction Media, we make the stars align for you. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Gail, who will introduce our speaker for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, this is going to have to be fast because I have lost the intro that I wrote for you. It's been a busy day. We're having free open houses at the Jordan House from 11 to 2 today in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. So it's been a busy day. Still trying to figure out how to work one more event into everything. But Jack Porter is a longtime supporter of everything that is preservation, especially with the amazing buildings that are in Sherman Hill. Hoyt Sherman was a contemporary of James Jordan, and it's the very first neighborhood. No,
Kind of.
Well,
Close enough.
No. I mean, to get the designation of a historic preservation neighborhood in Des Moines. And a lot of that is thanks to Jack and his spouse. So the fact that we can go through and see these amazing buildings that were built in the mid 1800s to early 1900s is really a commendable thing. And we're all about saving property. So at the Jordan House and the West Des Moines Historical Society. So no further ado, Mr. Jack Porter.
Thank you, ma'am. Yay. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. I hope it's worth your time. I can't help it. Graduated from Valley way back in 1965. Lived on 12th Street, and I joke with people. I say, you know you're old when you knew the people the streets are named after. So Elmer P. True was our neighbor on 12th Street, and George Mills was the mayor. My dad was one of the inspectors for the city of West Des Moines way back when. And really, I've always had a passion for Valley Junction. And I remember my mom and dad having some pictures when the water tower was being painted over, changing it from Valley Junction to West Des Moines. And I've had the opportunity in my job. I retired from the State Historic Preservation Office as the preservation architect for the state of Iowa back in 2014. Seems like just the other day. And I reviewed in federal and state historic tax credits. And that's where I got involved with the Jordan House, looking at the historic resource there. And actually, when I was a scout with Troop 100, or 100 out of United Methodist at 8th and Grand, we used to do camps across from the Jordan House, and my folks are buried in Jordan Cemetery. So I want to thank you for coming. Martha, my wife, she's an architect, Martha Green, And we were talking last night. Well, what do you want the message to be? And I go, hell, I don't know. But we talked about it a little bit. And I said, I would really like, because my background, I have a master's in architecture from Iowa State. I said, I really want to try to show that neighborhoods are a viable, living, they change, they grow, and I've always appreciated the history of them. So being background in architecture, it's the design stuff that I really like. And I'm going to try to share with you some photos. I've been, as a bad way to start a presentation, I was struggling with PowerPoint for the last 3 or 4 days trying to get it to work. So I'll do my best. We are going to have some question and answers after. I'm not going anywhere. So I did want to show what these, and I realize not everybody can read a map. But for me, I find these really interesting. This map is the Sherman Hill neighborhood. It's called a Sanborn Fire Insurance map from 1901. And to give you a little, this, if you can't see back there, I couldn't see it if I was back there. Crocker, Center, Pleasant, Woodland, Ingersoll. This is the Birds Run Creek that you'll hear about sometimes. It's all buried now. This is 20th Street. And as you know, the MLK now comes up through here. Smoky Row is here. The Gateway Market is, Woodland, where Bird School used to be. Hoyt Sherman Place is right here. And so then Methodist Hospital is over here. If you've ever been in the history of Des Moines and you've heard about West High School, it's right here. And actually, West High School, one of the buildings was still there when Martha and I moved into Sherman Hill back in 1977. So this then is 1920. Kind of the same scale. Again, Harding Road, which it used to be called, it's not even been built yet. But this is now West High here. This is still Hoyt Sherman. And notice between 1900 and 1920, the auditorium has been built, 1920, and the gallery, 1905, after Hoyt Sherman and gave it to the Des Moines Women's Club, or they bought it. West High School, this is the very oldest part, but this was the part about, I'm going to guess 1905, 1910. I don't know the exact date. This was a part of West High that was still there when we moved into our neighborhood. Pleasant, Woodland, High Street, Center. The dark areas, which didn't print off very well, those were historic structures that we were trying to keep track of between the first dates of 1901 and 1920. Trying to think. So that's kind of the orientation. Again, Crocker, Cottage Grove now comes around and turns that, but Hoyt Sherman is still there. So with that in mind, I want to give you a little background, a little context. I'll move this back. Is that better? Okay, works. 1700 to 19, River Des Moines has always been a controversy. What did the city of Des Moines actually get its name? But it was all about, the French and the Indians and the fur trade way back when, and how the Des Moines River was originally named. You may know, of course, that Des Moines was incorporated as a city in 1843. Sorry about that. Iowa became a state in 1846 and is celebrating its 175th anniversary. And Des Moines then became the capital in 1857. Keep kind of those dates in mind. And I don't know if you've seen this or not, but this is the population of, okay, good. Sorry about that, kids. 1846, Des Moines had 100 people in it by census, apparently. The reason the 1890 date is so important is you'll see some of the dates of the structures we're going to talk about a little bit. 1880, there's a few structures that were built in Sherman Hill, which we call it now Sherman Hill. It used to be called Oak Hill historically. But you notice there's only 12,000 people in Des Moines. And sometimes we forget how few people actually lived here. And then there was just a real flurry of construction and expansion of the city in 1900. Whoops. And you may know Captain Allen's cabin was down at Fort Des Moines number 2. Fort Des Moines number 3 is at the Army Post Road. Still, part of it is still an active fort. But Fort Des Moines number 2 is essentially around where the area of the Science Center is built. And the rivers, of course, have totally changed since Fort Des Moines was there. But it was primarily built to keep the white settlers from taking the Native American Indian lands until the horn went off. Iowa, her affections, like the rivers of her borders, flow to an inseparable union. Does anybody have an idea where that quote is located at? It's carved in stone. Anybody want to take a guess? Where? No. It's going to be kind of interesting in a little trivia tidbit. That is in the stone of Iowa inside the Washington Monument. That's the quote. I'm going to be throwing a little bit of trivia here and there. As soon as I relax. Jordan House. You know about Jordan House, of course, and all of its history. And for some reason, the automation isn't quite working right. So sorry about that. But this is the state capitol, a construction in 1853. So this is up where the old capitol used to be, but it's up on the hill on the east side. There's just very little documentation about what that area looked like before the capitol, the original capitol, was built. Oh, so it's out of sequence, fine. That was the original capitol, 1854, and it kept going until 1884 when the new capitol was built. As mentioned, Terrace Hill, when Sherman Hill and the northwest side of Des Moines was being built, of course, this was the icon structure for the city. B.F. Allen built it. The architect with B.F. Allen was W.W. Boyington. W.W. Boyington was also the architect for most of downtown Chicago. Not all the buildings, but one of the buildings that's left after the fire was the great big water tower. That was a W.W. Boyington out of Chicago. Just in 1870, and the reason I bring this up is because that's kind of when Sherman Hill started really getting going. And I have no idea why it is doing what it's doing. 1501 Woodland, Hoyt Sherman's home. And this shows with the new auditorium built in 1904. But Hoyt Sherman, this is kind of a family picture. I understand where the mansion is, or on the grounds of the mansion. they lived in a house like this. So this is the Sherman family photo. And Hoyt Sherman Place, which by Hoyt. Oh well. Okay, fine. If you know the history of Hoyt Sherman, the brother of Tecumseh Sherman, all that stuff. Okay. I think I should have had a couple of beers before I came, but we'll get through it. The other thing you may or may not know that in 1890, all of these cities existed and they were combined into the city of Des Moines by legislative action. Sevastopol, North Des Moines, and sometimes you'll see some of the older histories that talk about these different cities. We forget about them. Okay, fine. This is, I wanted to cover some of the really key statewide City Des Moines, Sherman Hill historic properties. The first, okay, first one is Uncle Henry Wallace. This is Uncle Henry with Tama Jim Wilson. And okay. So Tama Jim and Uncle Henry Wallace were friends and cohorts. Tama Jim Wilson was the first Secretary of Agriculture from Iowa. And apparently it had been offered to Uncle Henry, but he turned it down. And he lived at the corner of where the Wallace Foundation is at now, at 16th and Center Street. If you haven't had a chance to go on a tour or have dinner there, I highly recommend it. They're great people. His son was Henry C. or Henry Cantwell Wallace, who was actually died in office in the 1920s. He was there from 1920 to about 1940. His home was over by Grace Methodist Church, is now. And then Henry Agard Wallace, Henry A. Wallace, is Henry C.'s son. And as you know, Henry A. was the Vice President of the United States. He was one of the founding partners for Pioneer Seed. I think the real, okay, fine. Real value of the Wallace family, when we were first trying to save the Wallace house, we approached the family, and Jean Wallace Douglas, his living daughter, was, very reluctant, because when Henry A. ran for vice president or for president in 1948, he was treated really badly. There's film, The Political Life of Henry A. Wallace. It's really nice to watch because we don't really get a very good idea about what Henry A. happened to him during the campaign. He was accused of being a communist. He was egged in the South because he insisted that all of his rallies be integrated. And the family said it was a real hard time. And then he was a third-party candidate when the election of Truman and what's his name? Forgive me, senior moment. Dewey, thank you. They ran, and their members almost tied. Henry A. was the third-party candidate at that time. But to me, and the message we gave and shared with the Wallace family, it's not the political life of the Wallace family. It's important, of course, but it's the agricultural heritage that they provided to Iowa and agriculture. There's a lot of arguments about hybridizing corn, but there was another factor in that, and that's George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver, as you may know, was a student at Simpson, but he apparently was sponsored by the Wallace family to come to Iowa. Well, he, I don't know the transition, but Henry C. was a professor at Iowa State University or Iowa Agricultural College. George Washington Carver ended up going to Iowa State. He was the first Black doctor to graduate with a doctorate to graduate from Iowa State. He obviously went on to Tuskegee from Iowa State and became super famous with all his research. But what I think is important is their mentoring and sponsorship and helping George Washington Carver come to Iowa and Iowa State. There's another part of that, and that is that they sponsored trains that went out. There was a dairy train, there was a corn train. I have no idea how many trains, but they would go into rural Iowa to teach the farmers about new techniques in corn or dairy farming and that sort of thing. And apparently that was one of it wasn't where the Extension Service was born, but it's one of the impetus to create the Extension Service. So it's all those connections that we talked to Gene Wallace Douglas about to get support to save the Wallace House. This is a house, 840 18th Street. I don't know why it's doing the automatic. I'm sorry about that, guys. That's still there. We think it's probably one of the oldest houses in Sherman Hill. We've documented so far 2 houses for sure that were built in the 1870s besides Hoyt Sherman Place. And this is one of them. It's we live on 18th Street. Now, starting getting into what happened in Sherman Hill. So 1870s, you know, Hoyt Sherman Place was built. There wasn't a lot more that we thought, which wasn't real and wasn't actual, but there was farmhouses here and there. And you'll see them in different neighborhoods where one house that looks very old, usually they sit way back from the street, and there are farms, and that's where they lived. So we think maybe that brick house was actually the owner of some farms, but that period of time is really hard for me to dig and get the actual who were they, and how long were they there, and what were they doing, that sort of thing. I see a misspelled Leonard. This is the Sherman House. It's right next to Hoyt Sherman Place on Woodland Avenue. The reason it is important to historically is in the 1880s, there were several merchants, wealthy. A lot of Jewish people moved to Sherman Hill. They had merchants, lawyers, doctors, that sort of thing. And they built these grand mansions that, and we'll talk about that a little bit, about what happened to them. That is still there. I just didn't put in a recent picture. It's been all rehabbed. This is some of the detail. I love details, but the automation isn't working. I don't know why, but that I really love color and design, and this is one of the stained glass windows. Now, when you start looking at the details of that structure, okay, fine. I think I need to go slower. I don't know why it's skipping, but this is a house also on 18th Street, 1880. But you'll notice as I go through some of these various houses, they're not all big mansions. We originally always thought that the big mansions, if you look at most historic areas, the big houses are on the corner, and they've, you know, just the way it is. So we always thought they were first, and all the little houses that you'll see, but cottages and that sort of thing built in between them, we thought that was for the workers or, you know, side yard or whatever. We're beginning to believe is the other way around, that the smaller houses, cottages were there first, and then the bigger houses were torn down or built, and the little houses were torn down. So we don't have a record of the whole neighborhood before 1901, but the Sherman house is right there. Woodland and Pleasant, Grand Avenue were the mansions. That's where they were all, we were on. Sherman Hill was actually on the western edge of the mansions. Most of them went on to the east. And when the freeway was built, saw some remnants of some of the big, beautiful mansions that were absolutely destroyed in the 60s when the freeway was built. But by then, they were starting to fall apart and it turned into tenements. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. This is an important, okay, fine. T. Fred Henry. He lived at 17th and Woodland. I don't know if any of you know T. Fred Henry, but he was a big band leader. His heyday was like 1910 to 1920. He died in 1922, 1924. But this is his band, and that's him on the far left. Jazz. I'm not a musician. I don't do a lot of history. But T. Fred Henry was playing jazz with the big band. Notice the instruments the band had. Back in 1910, 1915, 1920, before World War I, where jazz really took off because of this black soldiers entertaining troops on their way over to the war. So this part, house, 17th and Woodland, is where T. Fred Henry lived, but it's from 1898. What I don't have for you, and I wish I did other than this, is the adjoining carriage house. That's what the neighborhood called it. That's what we all thought it was. But I found, and I didn't bring it. 1895, the Sanborns were just doing commercial areas. And I found a Sanborn map showing Mrs. Taylor's pottery house at 18th and Woodland on the northeast corner. And I believe that this was the pottery barn for that pottery. There is no known examples left of her woodwork, but I found a large article announcing her show in one of the real high-end department stores that was downtown Des Moines. Even the Iowa pottery people, when I inquired about it, they said they never heard about it. So I told them about, well, that's what the Sanborn calls it. And I think there's no way a horse could fit into this structure like some of the other ones because the basement is just not that big. But it faces right onto Woodland Avenue. And so that's why everybody thought it was a carriage house. The inside of this house is absolutely amazing. It's beautiful woodwork, just absolutely gorgeous. Big high ceilings, the whole thing. Now, this, the Haywood House, starting 1880s, kind of keep track now. This was start of the big mansions in Sherman Hill, early 1880s to late 1880s. Oh, that's good. Love it. Okay, fine. Bear with me, guys. This is the Emmaus House. It was E.S. Chandler's home, 1912 1521 center, sorry. This is the front door. And what's interesting about the character, if you ever get a chance, look at the detailing of these doors. You'll see a lot of them in Sherman Hill this way, but this is probably the most intricate carved. There's a face in that door. Too bad the wasn't able to get a better rendition of that. Also, but you notice how big they are. This is just right to the west of the Emmaus house, the Israel house. It is undergoing a full rehab. You'll see it plywood all over the windows and stuff. But what's interesting inside, we think a fireplace, you would burn either coal, which they're shallow, or wood, they're bigger. This house, the hearth tile, which normally stops where the firebox is at, goes all the way to the back, and then the inside of the firebox is finished with tile, not brick. And the flue has a round pipe. And we go, what? And it looks original. As they've uncovered more and more of the woodwork, they found cherry woodwork and walnut woodwork. It's got all the ornate details. It's absolutely gorgeous inside. But we can't figure out, there's two fireplaces and the remnant of a third. And in the 1880s, it was very common that there'd be a fireplace at each of the main rooms for heat. So it's a real mystery. Now this one is probably the finest mansion in Sherman Hill. It was rehabbed years ago by Ralph and Martha Gross. Martha still lived there. Ralph has passed away. But when they found it had two things that they started working on right away. It had the original gas operating lights, and it had an operating fire alarm system. So it was really interesting. I have a tendency to go like that. But while I'm thinking about it, in 1900, there was a conversion between gas and this newfound supply called electricity. And so if you go into homes that either they have original light fixtures or they've bought light fixtures, you'll see square tube, brass, and you'll see what's called a combination fixture. So out the top, oftentimes there would be either a big globe and I'm not sure, but I'll call it a pipe. I don't know. It's where the flame was lit. And then down below, you'd find electricity. Smaller globes, but electrical globes always pointed down, and gas globes always pointed up. So I'm going gas and electric in a brass fixture. What could possibly go wrong? But it was very popular. And that's why you see a lot of those fixtures today where they've been converted to all electricity. And some of them still have the gas cock where they could turn on and off the gas. Fascinating. That's actually a gold trim, the real thin gold stuff, leaf. They've done a wonderful job with this property. Inside, it's absolutely amazing. So here's another one, Bridal Row. And Bridal Row is just to the north side of Hoyt Sherman. And it is where 15th Street used to be. But now 15th Street takes a little jive there where you go into the hospital. And you notice how it kind of turns and lines up with 15th Street that goes further on south. Okay, fine. Is this the 13th? I just got to check the date. it can't possibly be operator error. All of these, there was 4 houses, all the same, except they flipped the floor plan. They were all built by one of the Shermans. I'm drawing a blank whether I think he was a son. I can't remember his first name. Sorry about that. But the reason they actually had the name changed to Bridal Row is because one of the HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning contractors supplied all the furnaces for these 4 houses, and they called it Bridal Row. And so the neighbors that actually own the houses there petitioned the city to have this little dead-end street that parallels 15th Street where they park. They're all now Bridal Row. So it used to be 15th Street. This is just one on the corner to give you some some idea about the amount of work. And if you notice, aluminum siding and vinyl siding, I honestly wish it never been invented. However, it's just a whole series of sidings, artificial sidings, whether it was tar siding, metal siding, aluminum siding, vinyl siding. They all destroyed most of the character beneath it if they were projection. But the other thing it normally did was save some of the details. And if you look real close, you can see above the main window that there was a nice little detail, which was quite common. So if you go by this house today, you'll see how they've taken that outline and recreated it. This is probably one of the most historic houses, in my opinion, in the entire city of Des Moines. You look at it today and you go, really? But Mifflin Bell, M. Bell, was the nation's architect in the 1890s. He was appointed, forget what president, 1882, 83, 84, in that kind of area. Bell and Hackney were the architects that finished the construction and supervision of the state capitol because the original architect, Bigard, had passed away during its construction. Bigard, Bell, and Hackney Bell and Hackney worked for Bigard in his Chicago office. So when he died, they moved to Des Moines and they finished the Capitol. So M. Bell's initials are in the second half after World War or Civil War, when the second half of the Washington Monument was built. M. Bell. He designed High Victorian. If any of you were familiar with the federal courthouse downtown, or if you see federal courthouses around the country where they've saved them and preserved them, they're High Victorian. His office designed those in the 1880s and 1890s. It's kind of interesting because it's one of the few obituaries I've ever met or read, which said, this guy's a piece of work, really. They didn't like him. I don't know why. He for Des Moines, yeah, I guess so. They didn't like Victorian architecture. Who knew? But this is one of the few houses. I don't know if I can show it to you. Try. Nope. It's not going. There. That's the porch that's been. Maybe if I could just sit on it. Oh, no, that ain't gonna work. There. The porch has actually been enclosed, and that's looking south. And what's interesting about it is that front door, you come up those steps, and it's to your right, or you're facing north when you go in. It's one of the few high-style houses I've ever been in that the front door did not face the street. Now, where that construction is, where the gable roof is at, that probably was a great big tower that went up, and it was removed at one time. Where all those little windows are at, that's enclosing a porch. That whole thing was a porch looking to the lawn to the south. It's really cool. In 1904, Finkbein bought it. Bell died, I can't remember the exact date, but it was right at the turn of the century in Chicago. He went back. Now, these are just random houses throughout the whole Sherman Hill neighborhood. This one is really neat. This is on Woodland Avenue, kind of real close to the Aposto restaurant, Tony Limo's place on Woodland. I took this picture after the siding had come off, and it doesn't really do a very good job, but it's awfully close to being a shingle style house from the standpoint of the eaves, and that pitch is like the same kind of pitch that Terrace Hill has for their roof. Don't know anything historically about it yet, but it's just a beautiful shingle work. You can kind of see it in the picture by where the porch and stuff was at. Yeah, it's not letting me show you what it looked like. This is just the painted, and I apologize for the poor quality of my photography, but it has been pretty well rehabbed and painted and repaired. There's a couple of houses on 19th Street in the 800 block just south of Smoky Row that are all from the 1880s. There's two of them there, before and after. Oh, it's working this time. This house is down on across from Gateway at 20th and Woodland. Little cottage. It's just the painting details and bringing out. I was telling my wife, I said, architects just drive me nuts. Why would you ever paint a house dark gray? And you'll notice if you drive around Sherman Hill, you'll see a couple that are now all white. When we first moved in, all the houses were white. And so a lot of people started studying the paint details, whether it was an 1880 house or a 1900 house, to figure out the paint brings the character of the architecture of the structure to the surface. And when they're all painted white or all painted really dark, that details just all gets lost. Okay, I'll get off my. This is the Pasto. This is Tony Limo's place. That's the before. But notice the window detail, even though the picture a little warped. But now you see up on top there to the right, that's a sleeping porch. It was real common for sleeping porches to be to the east or to the south of structures. This, whoops, 905 18th Street and 911 18th Street are two brick structures, and usually bricks homes represent a very early period of time. So this is just a guess, 1880. But William McHenry, Judge McHenry, lived here, and then the other one, and we're not quite sure because of how the abstracts are, which one was first, which one was second. But you notice the stone lintels and the patchwork that have been done. There's been some alterations done in this house. But William McHenry was mayor of the city Des Moines when the Spirit Lake Massacre occurred. And there's stories that said by the time that Des Moines was able to get a posse together to go after him, the Indians were long gone. And can you imagine riding a horse from here to Spirit Lake? How long it might have taken him anyway. So McHenry Park, that sort of thing. And now a little side story, and I haven't researched it, but I read an article. There was a huge debate about the gold standard as shifting it to silver. And Henry Wallace, Uncle Henry Wallace, was on the side of gold, and William McHenry was on the side of silver. And apparently it got really heated during that time. I've not seen a whole lot of research about what the whole ruckus was about. This is actually the home of Governor Cummins. It used to be, oh, wait. Stop. Just stop. Okay. Governor Cummins, the home was on Pleasant Street. Do you know where Pleasant goes into the hospital? And you have 15th Street, and there's those big apartments that are right on the corner. This was just to the west of those apartments on the north side of Pleasant. It was picked up and moved to 16th Street, which is where this picture is taken after it was rehabbed. So that's before, and then this is after, when it was moved to 16th Street. Now, what I liked it, this is where I live, Martha and I. But what I'd like to have you look at is that little construction clear back in the corner. If you notice, and that's our neighbor's house, that was a carriage house for Dr. Maple's house that was on the corner of 18th and Center, and it would be on the northeast corner. It burnt down. We can find no records of when it burnt down, but we think it was right after the turn of the century. And we've been, looking at newspapers to see, but I might as well do it now. Roger Williams grew up in this house. He was born in Nebraska, but he moved. His family moved to Des Moines when he was like 2 years old. And his real Louis Wirtz is his real name, and his father was this pastor for St. John's Lutheran. And so he lived here until around 1920, and he was then back to see us. We had just bought our house. We bought our house in 1977. We immediately, both of us, we did history research, found out about his connection, and then there was a couple of distant family cousins that still lived in Des Moines. So my wife had actually knew who they were, and so we contacted them. They put us in touch with Roger Williams, and he was coming to Des Moines because his mother still lived here. And he said, I have a concert, and I'll come to Des Moines, and I can only give you 5 minutes, 15 minutes max. So we're young, we're standing on the front porch waiting for him, Here is a world musician, celebrity coming to visit our house. We're so excited. Do you think I bothered to record it? No. But yellow cab pulls up. He gets out. He said, just wait for me. It won't be long. We come in 2 hours later. He had a photographic memory. He told us what was in each room. He told us who the neighbors were. Did we think about recording it? No, but it was so neat. So when he was getting ready, Mr. Williams, we thought you only had a few minutes. He said, well, he said, last time I was here, the previous owner that we bought the house from wouldn't let him pass the front door. They just would not let him in. He just stopped by, wanted to look at the house one more time. And we said, wow. He said, thank you. He was in every cupboard, every closet, attic, basement, all the way around. And one of the things he told us about, do we have time? One of the things he told us about, we had a bunch of these little rocks in our basement, or our backyard, I mean. And we were trying to figure out what. And so one of them was growing up in a maple tree. And so when that maple tree got bent over because of a storm, I was digging it up so they could ground the stump. That little rock was a boulder. And so we said, Mr. Williams, what are the boulders? He said, well, my dad would like boxing. And so he put those boulders in a great big circle and then filled the inside with sand. Now, gas and electric and a brass fixture, what could possibly go wrong with a boxing ring surrounded with boulders? But that's what he said. And so we found more, and some of them were still in a circle, kind of, you know how that goes. And so we kept them, and now we have a rock garden. But this is what our house looked like. I'm going to have more on that if I don't bore you to death before then. This is our neighbor's house. That's a better picture of that carriage house, but it's been totally rehabbed now. That is before rehab, and it's hidden. And sorry. So this is some houses on 19th Street before, during, and after. Again, 804 17th. This is on the corner. I wanted to show you. I want to make sure I have the right house. Hold on a second. Oh well. Okay, I did something. I don't know what I did. It's froze. Couldn't possibly be operator error. So I did something.
That's all right. We won't charge you for it. Wait, actually, click.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
Hold on.
okay.
See,
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
it's set up to automatically change.
I'll just keep talking faster, I guess. This is a house on 18th Street. The 700 block of 18th Street, I think, is one of the highest density blocks in the whole neighborhood. It's got some huge apartments. It's going backwards, I think.
No, it's going forward.
But when you get a chance, and I hope you do have an opportunity to drive around the neighborhood, you'll see a lot of big mansions, but notice some of the little ones. They have incredible detail. The other thing, there's been over 20 structures moved into Sherman Hill, and that's one of them. That's the Home Reborn that used to be at the Vets Auditorium for the big savings, American Federal Savings and Loan. That was actually a two-story house, but it was moved from Vets Auditorium in 1979 at the corner of 18th and Center. Okay. Can I just ask you to do next? Woo, woohoo! So these houses are on the western edge, and they're the two, 1.5 story cottages that are sprinkled throughout Sherman Hill, and some of them still have some really neat shingle patterns. Some of the brackets are still there. Not quite so fast. So this house at 19th Street is actually, I mean, a lot of overgrown trees in our neighborhood and rubbish and stuff. Okay, next. Rehabbed. She was actually the spouse of Slipknot. Those are some of the few row houses left in the city of Des Moines. And if you look at some of these maps down further south, and these are all those kinds of houses, but there's literally hundreds down along University or Ingersoll. I mean, there's also a unique double house, and that's two houses side by side. This is one of the examples. It's on 19th Street, and there's a wall between, so they're just side by side houses. We'd call them duplexes today, but historically they're called double houses. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh, see, that was such a cool thing. I worked for hours to get that. The other. Now I don't have any idea what's going on there. This was a house. Oh, there you go. This is a house on 20th Street and Center. It's on the southeast corner, but the Coronado burnt down. We were in the neighborhood at the time, and that house was moved in 1992 and 93. And usually most of the house moves we've had are 2 or 3 houses train because of the utility work and the police and all that stuff. Okay. A lot of them came from Drake neighborhood. Just some typical smaller houses. Okay. Wellsport Portwell at the corner of Woodland and 19th Street. One's Portwell, Wellsport. Those columns are reconstructed columns. And we lived here when the original columns were cut down with a hacksaw or chainsaw or something and removed. But Hatch Properties, Jack Hatch, they rehabbed those and put them back up because they found some of the drawings. Okay. Liner or Leaner, whichever way you like the Liner or Leaner, is a small street just to the south of Smoky Row, and it's starting to be rehabbed. There's been some new construction down there. It kind of loops off of 19th Street back down towards Center. Okay. This is back on 20th Street. Can't do it, huh? This is a high Victorian house. There's actually pictures of the arches were very Gothic. It was absolutely gorgeous. This house was moved in 1989 from 14th Street Place and by a friend of ours. And the original name was Carter's. So, no, I don't know because the owner, Rick Nelson, they just moved, so I don't know the new owners yet. It was when it was the Carter House, yeah. Okay. More examples of some of the small cottages, and if you look at this, they're all around mid to late 1890 to 1900. just scattered all over. Okay. She told me I have to speed it up. So we're probably getting closer and closer to 1900. And I am so sad that the automation isn't working. I have no idea why. Okay. This house is non-existent, but it's kind of almost across the street from us. Oh, back. But what's important is this house is still there. And it's all been messed up. But some neighbors were in the attic, and the framing for that turret is all still there. So they just framed around it and squared it off and made it into a junky house. I wish I had that car. Yeah, well, it did. Lafayette Young lived here. Lafayette Young, there was senior and junior, were very important early leaders at 1880, publishers, and also senators. Okay. Okay. So this is north of Crocker, and if you can imagine that area on 18th Street, if you notice that there's, schools. If you notice over here, a school still exists. It's where Wilkie House is at now. But also, this used to be a water tower, and there's these small little houses. There's like 3 of them where the water tower was built. They're probably moved in. Okay. So we're getting into the 1890s, and so Des Moines is growing north and northwest at this time for our neighborhood anyway. All obviously before the freeway was built, because Good Park was part of a park system for Sherman Hill at one time. Okay. So, just more examples of starting to get into the 1890s, and the detailing, you can't really tell because you don't know what was taken off. And so some things like this front porch is a reconstruction, not knowing exactly what. Okay. This is a barn type of architecture. I'm trying to remember the exact. Claudia, you remember? Thank you. But a shingle style. And there's only a couple of houses in Sherman Hill where the siding is shingles. And it's usually always the upper story. There's one over on 16th Street where the upper windows, actually, the shingles curve into where the upper story windows are. It's pretty cool. Okay. This house, we call it Doc's house, has a beautiful garden. Okay. There was a nice custom built carrot cake. Next. This house also is moved in from north of the freeway on 19th Street, and it's at the corner of 19th and Leaner Liner. The Mayrock, around 1900, you'll start seeing some of these apartments, and there's more and more. What essentially happened between 1880 and the middle, before World War I, there was started to be these infill apartments. Okay, there's all kinds of various styles. Also, there's commercial development. This is right at the corner of 17th and Woodland. The Woodland Sundries was still there, and it was, if you wanted to hear any gossip about any neighbor, you just went and had breakfast. Worked every time. This building is still there. It was also a grocery store at one time. which a lot of these smaller brick structures were neighborhood grocery stores. Okay. This actually is a double house, although you couldn't tell it, but it had a major fire in it on 20th Street. Okay. Vines to Wines, I put this in there just to give them a plug. You can make appointments and make your own wine. Okay. There was 2 houses moved into 20th Street, which started to help turn 20th Street around. 20th Street from Woodland to Center was essentially ignored, and one time it was planned to be wiped out for construction of this new big street that was going to go up 20th Street. It is where Harding Road is today, MLK Parkway. Okay. This is probably one of the more fantastic structures. If we freeze the, would anybody like to guess how many apartments are in this? 1 guess. Any more? 5. Ah, it's beautiful.
So it doesn't go automated, maybe.
We've got to wrap it up.
Oh no, we're just getting on a roll. All right, keep hitting them. We'll just keep moving.
Is that apartment building still? Is that apartment building still here?
Everything I'm showing you is still there, except for that one that I say is not. They're all there. It's just south of the Mickle Center, going down the hill on the east side.
Because I've lived at 17th and 5.
Well, you never look north. This is an example of a double house. They're all there. And also then you can see these huge Algonquin and Allegre. They're like this at 15th and Pleasant. I threw this one in there because it's a church that Grace Methodist. This is now the cathedral, but I didn't get a new picture, and they rebuilt. This is some of the interior. It's called the Dayton plan for Methodist, and they would open up by screens. These happen to go up for Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas services. Okay. It's now called the Cathedral with a K. Okay. This is the Lexington, and I only want.
You're mean to me.
I'm so sorry. Has an open squirrel cage type of elevator, and of course the elevator inspectors go, "I'll get rid of that," and go, "Heck no! Can't we just like put glass up on the inside so people don't put their fingers through it?" Which is what their safety concern is, which understandably so. Okay, so here's the highlight: the Leonard and Bertha Strauss house. That's where Martha and I live. We found several pictures over the years. Okay, this is what it looked like. This is as we've done different things, paint it, re-roofed it 3 times. But the Strauss family was Moses, Leonard, and Bert. Bert was the son. He actually visited us. His family still were coming to Des Moines at that time to visit their cousins and stuff. And we had bought our house, and we had this stair fixture, and he walked in and said, "Hey, that's pretty darn close. Did you find it here?" We said, "No, we bought it at Hoyt Sherman Place at an antique store or a sale." So, okay. Also, a lot of the flats, Emerson, others, just a ton of them around the neighborhood. They essentially have single-loaded circulation with a nice, beautiful stair in the middle. What's interesting on the Van Cruz is that yellow house is actually the original carriage house. And Clary, actually, the house is still in the middle of this. It's pretty well bastardized up. but the foundation is there of the original house in some of the walls. And on the back porch, they enclosed it, but if you look up, you'll see some of the banding and some of the details of the upper story of that house. So they just built essentially on the facing to the east and facing to the south, and then bricked it all in. Okay. Happy Merry Christmas to you too. Just wanted to mention, it's not minor things. I wish I was able to figure out how to do a video of the Murillo. The Murillo was at 16th and High. When that was moved into Sherman Hill, it was 750 some tons. Another example of some of the smaller commercial buildings built in our neighborhood. Grocery store at one time, I would guess it was an antique store for a long time. Okay. We're coming to the end. So I just wanted to show you that so this also was moved from the east side, Burt's gas station, and now it's at the corner of 18th and Crocker. When we first moved, there was a gas station there. Back. Forward. I can't help but not have Chet Gwynn be part. He's kind of adopted son with the fire station up on 8th and Day. Now I want to end here, I think. Is that the last one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Jewish Home for the Aged is at 16th and 17th on Pleasant Street. It's now called the Robert W. Mickle Center, Neighborhood Resource Center. It's incubator. I'm the president of the board that owns it, nonprofit. But we try to keep the Jewish emblems intact. And this is on the entryway. And if you drive by it, you'll notice that this goes through a glass wall and then is on the outside on the north side of the building. And the Star of David motif is carried through. When we first got the building from the county, it still had a menorah painted on a small chapel area in the front room. But we rented out for nonprofits, and we've turned all the patient suites into offices. And they're a little less than 200 square feet each. But this is the 1960s. So the historic district period of significance is what it's called, goes from Hoyt Sherman when he built his house to the 1960s when the Mickle Center was built. So do we have time for questions and answers? Yeah. Oh no, we're out of time. I am so sorry. Please ask some questions if you want. She's buying. I sincerely apologize for the technical difficulties, but yes, ma'am.
Is there a neighborhood association?
Yes, ma'am. Sherman Hill Association. It started in 1977, 78, 79, right? And the first mission was to help create a historic district. But we had this terrible executive director. It was Claudia. Claudia, you gonna leave before I can tell a story? So where across from Hoyt Sherman Place, there's the Brickstone Apartments now, brand new. But there was a whole series of small cottages on the south side of Woodland between 15th and the house that's still there, and the Riley apartments are still there. But I remember Claudia standing in front of the bulldozer and go, "Bring it on, bulldozer." It was owned by a local automobile dealer, and they wanted to tear everything down before Sherman Hill became a Sherman Hill thing. And Claudia was standing in front of the bulldozer, go, "Bring it on." Thank you, Claudia. Claudia was our first ED. Did a great job. Yes, ma'am.
So Sherman Hill ends where 235 is?
Essentially, the neighborhood boundaries are 235 to Ingersoll from 15th Street to MLK. The historic district boundaries are just to the south of Woodland Avenue, and then they kind of gerrymander around when it gets north of Crocker. And then from
the other side of 235.
correct, yeah. Now, I remember when 235 was built, but I don't remember the houses by downtown that they tore down. I wish I was aware of what was going on at the time. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Are there covenants in the district that people have to follow to keep the integrity of the house?
No.
No?
However, it's not a covenant, but there's 3 districts that have petitioned the residents to ask the Des Moines City Council to create a local designated historic district. Sherman Hill, Owl's Head, and River Bend, and part of River Bend, the bigger neighborhood that we think about. In doing that, if you do an exterior alteration, you have to get a certificate of appropriateness. That does not include, we used to give a workshop called Myths and Untruths. It doesn't include painting. Some of the historic districts, primarily in the East Coast, not that I have personal knowledge, but they want to control the paint color, what trees you plant. Sherman, the Des Moines is not that way. We helped write that ordinance to establish the district. It is a design process of discussion. Doesn't mean something can't be torn down. It doesn't mean that something can't be added. But it does mean there's a citizens panel, the Historic District Commission, appointed by the council, where you have to apply, all for $10, to get a certificate of appropriateness. And you have to have that if there is a building permit required. So. Yes, ma'am.
We used to have walking tours.
Yes, ma'am.
Of Sherman Hill, was that something, sort of sponsored by the Sherman Hill Historic?
No, it was sponsored by the Sherman Hill Association as the primary fundraiser. I've been president. Martha and I have been very active in the neighborhood over the years and in the association. It started out for a very self-serving reason. People didn't know what this neighborhood was like until they got inside. Once they got inside, they go, "Whoa!" And that was our whole intent. And so we had special tours for realtors, appraisers, real estate agents, all the people who could potentially, we weren't very good because we were redlined at the time when Martha and I first moved in. But over the years, the knowledge, the interest, and it also, the thing I want to close with is there is a social network within the neighborhood. Every neighborhood has that potential to have one. But in our case, it was not only the Sherman Hill Association membership, but it was also the house tour, the volunteers, getting the houses open, cleaning the yard, scrub, all those things were networks that helped the social communication and the social support. Originally, when we first moved in, there was like 6 families. And I just so distinctly remember we would all, either Saturday evening or Sunday evening, we'd pack everything up, meet at the IHOP, which is now where Starbucks is going in, kind of in that area. And we would talk about, how do you do this? How do you do that? The part I wasn't able to share, it's not, I didn't mean it to look like your fault. My fault is Sherman Hill and every inner city neighborhood faces the same issues. 1900, World War I, GIs came home. They wanted to live and raise a family. World War II, mega, everybody wanted to have a family. In order to have housing, a lot of the big mansions and most of the apartment buildings were cut up into smaller units. Some they did very carefully, and they kept the original trim, for instance, in the doors and windows, but framed around them. So later, when they're trying to reduce density now, they take that off and the trim's still there. It might be damaged, but it's still there. Plaster, floors, tile floors, all those sorts of things are remnants that help give you a feel and character of a historic residence or place. The Secretary of Interior Standards with the National Park Service calls it character defining features, finishes, and spaces. So when you think about you go into a historic structure, first thing you probably notice is the paint or the trim or the floor or a fireplace, or just the fact that the walls are 11 foot or 12 foot high. Those things all are what make a structure feel historic.
They had, on one of the tours, they had homes in progress and some that.
We always try to encourage that, so people
Which was interesting.
people would come back over and over and over again and look at, whether you made any progress. We've been in our house since 1977. I'm still rehabbing. After I retired, I had the honey-do list. I'm now working on the damn it, get it done list. Not until COVID. It's in the budget for this year, and it's usually the last 2 weekends in September. They've talked about going back to one weekend, whether it's in September or October, don't know. We used to have Holiday on the Hill on Halloween, which is a fundraiser for the food bank. The last time I think they said there was like 5,000 people, and there's no charge. You just bring something so we can donate it to the food bank. Unfortunately, for me, the primary guy was Doug Burnett, and Doug Burnett was, I think, at least 7 foot tall. He might have been 8 foot. Everybody to me is tall, but he would dress up as Frankenstein and scare the bejesus out of people. He was a great guy. So we would do that. We would do Christmas in July on July 25th. And that we'd close down Woodland Avenue and have a party. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned redlining.
Yes, ma'am.
Was it because of the age of the houses or?
Well, that is a kind way to put it, but it was mostly risk from an investor because they felt, and remember the redlining policies started in the 1950s, but it was also racially biased because it was always the inner city. And in our case, it included Sherman Hill, and Sherman Hill has always had a really mixed population. And if you can't get a loan, you can't fix your house. And so the pioneers, urban pioneers as we were called, moved in and said, we don't give a damn, go away. We're going to do our own thing, and if you're going to borrow money, fine, we'll go to our parents. But yeah, I ended up with VA loan, which made all the difference in the world. Okay. Thank you for asking these questions, y'all. Appreciate it. Well, when I walked, I told you, I'm always just about ready to throw up every time I start one of these. And I'm always happy when it's over, but I also appreciate the opportunity so very much. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for not throwing up. That's the important part of it. The next Iowa Files will be Sunday, February 20th. A little background. In May 1917, the very first officers training camp for black men opened in U.S. military history. The very first camp opened Fort Des Moines. Over the next 6 months, 1,200 African American men were trained to lead segregated commands in World War I, knowing, having that pressure on them that their success or failure was going to be used by others as evidence about the abilities of their race. So Jeff Kluver, who is a longtime volunteer and board member at Fort Des Moines, will be coming to talk about the soldiers and one specific one, an amazing man named Charles Hamilton. So again, it will be live streamed on Facebook, YouTube, or you can come here. All that is thanks to the EMC Insurance Foundation, the West Des Moines Library, Friends Foundation, the Iowa Arts Council, and our members and donors. So get to see Hoyt, the Sherman Hill, go on the walking tour. It is fan-frickin-tastic. So thank you all for coming.
What
Oh,
you don't know is I'm treasurer of the Fort Des Moines Museum Board.
I knew you were on it, and that is another museum. It's generally open when volunteers are available on Saturdays. So take a look at their Facebook page or give them a call. That's a museum you have to go see. It's amazing.
And only, but make an appointment. We'll be there.
Oh, it's fantastic. So thank you so much for coming today.